Who started that?
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Retro Pop Planet. And if you're a Washington Commanders fan, you're having a great season. Regardless of where the team ends up, the fact that they are entering the first playoff run in 11 years is undeniably cool. And if you've been a fan for as long as I have, it's been pretty depressing. You kind of have to hide that fandom a little bit. So it comes to the topic of this video, and if you clicked on it, you probably want to know a little bit more about the famous, or is it infamous, seat cushion game. And I thought it would be cool to tell my story about it today because you see, I was there. Not only was I there, I actually was part of the yellow seat cushion. Let me explain. So if you're around this area, most people definitely remember that pivotal moment where that yellow seat cushion seemingly glided across the goalposts, and then it was just a rainstorm, and the game actually was suspended for something like 15 minutes to half an hour. I can't remember exactly how long, but not only was I there, I actually handed out the seat cushions before the beginning of the game. Most people don't know or don't really remember, but it was the National Capital Area chapter of the Boy Scouts of America that actually were invited to come out to that playoff game. And I think I got a call from one of my leaders in, I don't know, maybe a week or two before, and telling me that there was this opportunity. They were picking a lot of the older kids to actually go out and be a part of this event. And I was 14 at the time, and I had just completed my very first season of high school football. So this was like peak interest with football for me. I was obsessed with college and pro, and I'd only been to one Washington game before, but this game was like no other. The hype for this game was unbelievable, and I actually attribute it to say like a pro wrestling event. There was a lot of kayfabe involved. If you remember, you had so many personalities with Atlanta. Atlanta was actually playing the heel turn with players like Deion Sanders and Andre Rison and a flamboyant coach in Jerry Glanville. This had all the trappings of a major event. If you remember as well, MC Hammer was like best buddies with the team. In fact, Deion Sanders had appeared in a video or two of MC Hammer, and then MC Hammer did all these events with Atlanta, and he actually was at this game. So basically the day went a little bit like this. We arrived at the stadium, and it was RFK Stadium, and we actually drove there with some of our leaders. And we arrived maybe 2 hours before gates were supposed to be open, and we met with a person who took us in, and then they sort of explained how this whole process was going to work. They were going to bring in a ton of boxes to each gate, and then we were going to have to open the boxes, continue opening the boxes, and handing them out. And I believe the rule was one seat cushion per ticketed attendee. One seat cushion for each person entering into the stadium. And you remember, this is before security got really strict. There were no metal detectors, so you would just come up and you had an actual paper ticket. You would hand it to the teller at the gate, and then they would come in, and as soon as they come in, we would hand them a seat cushion. Now, the rare thing about this particular game, if you've been to any sort of modern sporting event where they have a giveaway like a bobblehead or something, there's usually only enough for like the first 2,000 fans. I believe they had an overflow of these seat cushions. They had more than enough for each person entering the stadium. So everybody in the stadium could conceivably have gotten one of these seat cushions. And once the gates opened, it was a madhouse. I don't know if these seat cushions had been promoted on the radio, but everybody definitely want one, and they were really a unique item, very similar to like a terrible towel from the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was something that was like a display board for the team. It was a functional thing that they could use, but it definitely was a hot item. And if you've ever worked like a retail job at the holidays and you've run a register, you know about how busy that gets, and it was very similar to that We couldn't keep boxes open fast enough. We had a leader with a box cutter, just kept opening boxes, and we're handing these suckers out like left and right. Some people were asking for 2. We had to be pretty strict and that make sure we only got them 1. And I actually set aside, I think I got 4. I set aside like 4 for myself. So right around, I think it was sometime in the second quarter, we actually ran out of all of these. We must have given out somewhere in the neighborhood of thousands at our particular gate, recognizing that there were Boy Scouts spread out throughout the stadium, handing them out at each of the little teller stations there at RFK. But then came time to figure out where we were going to go. I knew we were going to get a chance to see the game. We were waiting to see what seats we were going to get. And we had been kind of following along, listening to the radio and watching on the old school CRTs that were actually in the stadium. You could see the score and it looked like it was a wild game. The other thing that I will never forget is that this game was freaking cold and it was a frigid day, and I had to wear my Boy Scout uniform, and if you've ever worn one of those, you know they are not warm at all, and I was freezing. My toes were already starting to go numb, and we hadn't even gotten to the game yet. So anyway, somebody comes up to us around halftime, and we were expecting to go to our seats, and I was getting anxious because I wanted to watch some football at this point. They took us into an area, and then they said, well, we actually, because it's a sellout game, we don't have any seats available for you guys. So we're going to give you the next best thing, and we were all kind of wondering what that meant. And then we started descending, following this guy. We were descending down further and further into the bowels of the stadium. I thought we were going to be going on a lower level, and that would have been super awesome. We did something even cooler than that. They actually took us out through the tunnel that the team ran out of, and we watched the game from the sidelines. For the life of me, I can't remember if we were on the Washington side or if we were on the Atlanta side, and we were, I would say, probably a little bit behind the team and over to the side area, but we were all grouped up and we were lining both sides of the field. I remember seeing scouts on the other side of the field as well. You know, it was a little overwhelming, this fully packed arena that was supercharged, and the game was super tight, and it was a great game. And halftime ended, and I'll never forget, we were on the side that Atlanta ran out, and the Falcons ran along our sidelines. And, you know, being a football fan in general, it was cool seeing all these guys that you had seen on TV and in sports cards, and you had sort of maybe modeled your game a little bit after if you were a player. And Deion Sanders actually runs down, and he was high-fiving all of us. He said, "Go Scouts, go Scouts, go Scouts," or something like that. And I was just like geeked out. I thought it was super awesome. And MC Hammer was like with him. So MC Hammer actually, I believe, had been up in a booth and then watched the game somewhere down on the sidelines at one point. That's kind of what, that was his shtick. That's kind of what he did. It was pretty wild. The other thing that's crazy is if you've never watched a game from the sidelines, you really can't see a whole lot, the way that the bowl of the field goes. And then if you've ever stood on the sidelines behind a pro football team, especially a blue collar squad like Washington, these guys were monsters. The line was insanely huge, and being a 14-year-old kid, these guys seemed like larger than life. So I'll pause for a second, and you're probably wondering why I'm wearing an Oilers hat. Well, that's because I was a huge Oilers fan. We lived in Virginia, but I'm originally from Texas, and we had only lived in Texas a few years at that point, and I was a huge Houston Oilers fan growing up, and this was probably peak Oilers. They were actually in the playoffs that day as well against Denver, and they had the 4 o'clock game. Washington, Atlanta was 1 o'clock. I was waiting for this game to end, and then I was going to go home and watch my Oilers hopefully compete for a chance to go into the Super Bowl also. So this game was wild. I mean, everything that you could expect in a football game. It's probably one of the best actual games I've ever been to, and I've gone back and I've watched some segments of it. It's hard to remember every single play or every single player. I just remember this period. It was, you know, you had your sort of high flashy stars in Atlanta, these guys that were like completely over the top, and then again you had your blue collar Washington squad, which had probably one of the best receiving core in the entire league, and a quarterback in Mark Rippon, and then a running game that was strong, and a monster offensive line, and one of the best defenses in the league. So then we get to the moment of the cushion. All these years later, to me, it still seems like slow motion. And when you watch back in some of the video, you do see that like one cushion. I remember it being like one cushion sailing, and we were actually on the side where it happened. So I remember looking to my right and seeing that one cushion come out, and it was like slow motion. And then I guess people realized they could fly. Next thing you know, they are raining down on us, and it was crazy.
And a dagger in the heart of the Atlanta Falcon hopes.
And then the other thing I remember is that security, like field security, were furious because this thing, you figure out how much money on the line is for a game like this, and the TV schedules, they're trying to keep things super strict, and this was gonna be a massive undertaking cleaning up all of these seat cushions.
I think there's a flag down on the field, Vern, but I couldn't tell you where or what it was for.
Now, the other thing that got crazy is that people threw out their seat cushions and they realized, oh, I just threw away my collectible. And so what do you think they did? Yeah, they all came down actually looking for their seat cushions, and people were lining up on the railings like, hey kid, can you give me that cushion? Can you give me that cushion? And we got yelled at. We threw a couple up at the people, and then we were told if we were going to give them any more, we were going to lose our seats or place on the sidelines. They were going to kick us out of there. We kind of turned our backs to the stands and we could hear these people yelling. Basically, they just collected them up and put them in like tractors and like wheelbarrow type tractors and then carted them off the field. So if you threw down your cushion, you probably lost it completely. So I think that's why these things have become so rare, and they're talked about lovingly. I still hear people talk about the yellow seat cushion game, but I think it's almost like wonderment, you know, like some legendary thing, like lore almost, because people didn't keep them. They don't have them anymore, or they never had them, or they only had them during the game and then threw them onto the field and then never got one back because we ran out of them. But I still have mine, and I do remember carrying like 4 of them out of there, and we used them. My family used them for years for sporting events. They weren't very good. They were foam seat cushions. There's a rip. You know, most of them got like the rip on the side. When I ever see them in like a flea market or an antique show or something like that, there's always the telltale rips in them. And I think one of my parents' ones got like moldy or whatever, so I think it disappeared, and then they also fell apart. It was just plastic and foam. So you're probably wondering, where's mine? And I have it right here with me. It's the last one that we have left, and it's in horrible condition. I just wanted to show it off here because I think it's a really cool story, and it's a memory that I will always cherish as like one of the greatest sort of sporting legendary moments collectively that I had been to as a fan of just any sport, and football is like my favorite sport. So this was just a super rare thing when people talk about this game in conversation, and I can tell them not only was I there, but let me tell you a little bit more about this story. And I thought this would be a great time to actually share it on my channel since it is the new year. So without further ado, let me show off this cushion. Boom. Yeah, you can see it's in horrible condition. The handle is ripped. But I mean, this is just plastic. The foam is opened up. It was actually sponsored by Mobil Gas, and it has, you know, it's like PVC vinyl or something, and you're supposed to pull this little tab off, and this lets the air out. I would imagine most people, maybe we even sat on this without pulling the air out, and it just ripped open the sides. And then the foam is just doing what foam does over time. It just like starts to break down. But it's still a cool little piece, and I'm glad I have this memento from that day. Washington went on to win the Super Bowl that season. That was the last time they won the Super Bowl, and wow, that was the 91 season, and they won the Super Bowl in February of 1992. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that little story. If you like this video, please give it a like. Leave me a comment. Let me know if you were at the game, and if you were, do you still have your seat cushion, and is it in terrible condition like mine? And please feel free to subscribe to this channel. I will see you guys on the next video. Peace. Oh yeah, before I completely sign off, I probably should mention that the Oilers game actually started while we were still in the stadium, so I remember watching it, and then I got home to get warm, and it took forever to get home from the stadium, and I got home, I think somewhere at the end of the third quarter. I took a shower, and then I watched the Oilers lose in the fourth quarter. So, terrible ending to a great day.